I found the earrings at 6:40 on a Saturday morning, the 2nd of June, while I was changing the sheets before my mother-in-law arrived from the airport that afternoon. I want to be clear about the time, because people who have heard this story have sometimes asked me why I was changing the sheets at 6:40 in the morning on a Saturday. And the answer is that my mother-in-law, whose name is Lucia, has been sleeping in the same guest room of my home for 9 years of visits. And over those 9 years, I have learned, through a combination of observation, trial, and several small humiliations, that Lucia notices things. She notices if the hand towel in the guest bathroom is a different white than the bath towel. She notices if the water glass on the nightstand is a different pattern from the water pitcher. She notices, and this is the part that will matter in about 2 pages, if there are any traces of a previous occupant in a bed she is about to sleep in, which there had not been, because no one had slept in the guest room in a month. But Lucia's standard was not, no one has slept here in a month. Lucia's standard was, this bed has been made within the last 48 hours by a woman who is paying attention. And so I was up at 6:40, stripping a bed no one had slept in, because I was that woman. Because I had been that woman for the 9 years of my marriage. Because that was the contract I had signed when I married Lucia's only son. And because I was, on the morning in question, still honoring the contract. Although, as it would turn out over the course of that weekend, the contract was in its final 48 hours of enforcement. My husband's name was Raphael. He was asleep down the hall in our bedroom. He had gotten in late the night before, from a work event he had described to me as a dinner with the Houston team, which I had accepted as an explanation, as I had accepted many explanations over the last 14 months of our marriage, because questioning Raphael's explanations had become, in that period, something I was doing either not at all or obsessively, with no in-between. And I had decided, sometime in March, that I was going to stop, for a while, and just watch, because obsessive questioning had not been working, and neither had the alternative. I had been watching since March. It was now June. I had a legal pad in the locked drawer of my home office desk with 91 dated entries on it, and I had told no one, not my sister, not my best friend, not the therapist I had stopped seeing in February because I had not felt ready to give her anything real, and certainly not Raphael himself, because the entire premise of the watching was that I was not going to say anything until I knew what I knew. I was in the guest room when Lucia's son was upstairs in our bed. I had the old sheets balled up in my arms. I was walking back down the hall to toss them into the laundry chute in the mudroom when I stopped at our bedroom door. Just stopped, for no reason I could name, and I looked through the half-open door at my husband's sleeping shape under the duvet, and I felt, for the first time in a long time, something I would describe as curiosity. Not suspicion, not anger. Curiosity. The specific curiosity of a person who has been keeping a log for 3 months and who has not yet, despite the log, found the single physical object that would make everything simple. I walked into our bedroom. I was still holding the guest sheets. I set them on the chair by the window. Raphael did not stir. He has always been a heavy sleeper. He was lying on his back with his mouth slightly open, one arm flung over the edge of the mattress. I walked around to his side of the bed and I lifted his pillow. There was nothing under it. I walked around to my side. I lifted my pillow. There were 2 earrings under my pillow. They were small, gold, a specific kind of small drop earring that is sometimes called a huggy. Although these were not exactly huggies, they were what my sister Tessa once called the kind of earring that costs real money and doesn't look like it costs real money, which is the most exact description I can give you. They were pretty. They were tasteful. They were also, and I noticed this before anything else, 100% not mine. I do not wear gold. I have not worn gold since I was 22, which is when I inherited a small collection of silver jewelry from my grandmother and decided, somewhere in the emotional logic of grief, that I was going to be a silver woman for the rest of my life. I had told Raphael this on our 4th date. I had not worn a gold anything at our wedding. My wedding band was platinum. The engagement ring, which Raphael had picked out with the input of his sister and against the direct wishes of his mother, who had wanted gold, was also platinum. Raphael knew, as well as anyone knew anything about me, that the only gold objects in our bedroom were the doorknobs, which had come with the house. I stood by the side of the bed. I held the 2 earrings in my palm. I did not feel anything, for a long second, that I could describe. I felt the specific, still flat feeling of a person whose 3 months of watching had just, in one quiet morning gesture, come to an end. I did not say anything to Raphael. I did not shake him awake. I did not do any of the things that a wife does in this moment in a movie, which are all the wrong things anyway. I closed my fingers around the earrings. I walked back into the guest room. I put the earrings on the nightstand in the little porcelain dish that sits there to hold the hair ties and cufflinks and reading glasses of anyone sleeping in that room. I put them in the dish gently, the way a waiter places 2 olives on the rim of a martini glass. Then I picked up the old guest sheets, walked to the mudroom, and tossed them down the chute. I went back to the kitchen. The kettle was on. My coffee was waiting in the press. I poured it. I sat down at the island. I opened my phone. I looked at the time. 6:48. Lucia's flight landed at 2:15. I had 7.5 hours. I did not use the 7.5 hours to confront Raphael. I did not use it to leave. I did not use it to pack a bag. I used it instead to do what I had been doing for 3 months, which was to take notes and to think. And what I thought about over my cooling coffee on the quiet Saturday morning was a single question that organized itself in my head with the clarity of an argument I had been rehearsing without knowing it. The question was, why are these earrings here? Not whose are they? I already had a working theory about whose they were, because my 3-month log had narrowed the field considerably, and the most likely candidate was a woman named Sabine Moreau, with whom Raphael had been working closely on a long-running project since February of the previous year, and whose ears I had confirmed by scrolling through her LinkedIn and the firm's website, and a charity gala photo that had been posted to Instagram in December appeared to be pierced with small drop earrings of the exact style currently sitting in a porcelain dish in my guest room. I was not certain the earrings in the dish were hers, but I was reasonably certain, and certainty of the final granular kind was, at that point, of less interest to me than the larger structural question, which was why they were in my bed. The earrings had not been in my bed the night before. I had changed the sheets in our bedroom on Thursday afternoon. I had made the bed Thursday evening before Raphael got home. I had slept in that bed Thursday and Friday night, alone on Thursday because Raphael had been in Houston, alone on Friday until roughly midnight when Raphael had come home, at which point I had been asleep and had stayed asleep until he got into bed, and had then, out of the corner of my consciousness, in that almost asleep half state, registered that he had gotten into bed without taking a shower, which was not his usual pattern, but which I had, in my 3 months of watching, not confronting, noted and let pass. I had woken up at 6:30 to start the guest room. He had still been asleep. The window in which the earrings could have arrived in our bed was, therefore, between midnight Friday and 6:40 Saturday morning, and the only person who could have brought them there was Raphael. He had come home with 2 earrings in his pocket, and he had, at some point between midnight and 6 a.m., taken them out of his pocket and put them under my pillow. That was the part that did not resolve. Why my pillow? Why under it? Why not in a drawer, in a box, on his dresser? Anywhere but in my bed. I sat at the island and I turned the question over. I will tell you what I eventually concluded, which I did not conclude the Saturday morning, but which I concluded over the following week with the help of my therapist, whom I went back to, and with the help of my sister, and with the help of one very specific conversation with Lucia, which we will come to. I eventually concluded, after a great deal of thinking, that Raphael had not put them there intentionally, that he had come home drunk, or near drunk, or tired, and that he had taken off his suit jacket in our bedroom, and that he had emptied the pockets onto the nightstand on my side of the bed, which was the side closest to the bedroom door and therefore the side where he routinely dropped things on his way to the bathroom, and that the earrings had fallen from a handful of other objects onto the bed, and that he had, half drunk and half asleep, swept them under what was nearest in order to get into the bed, and the nearest was my pillow, and that he had then gotten into bed and fallen asleep and forgotten entirely that he had done it. I concluded this because Raphael was, for all his other qualities, not a stupid man. And a stupid man is the only kind of man who puts his mistress's earrings under his wife's pillow on purpose. A man conducting a 14-month affair with a colleague is a man who knows the basic hygiene of deception and who would have, if he had been operating at full capacity, noticed the earrings at some point before he came home and disposed of them. He had not. He had come home with them in his pocket, and in a careless, tired gesture, he had deposited them in the precise location that would, in a different life, be called a confession. That is what I think happened. What I thought that Saturday morning at the island, with my cooling coffee, was narrower. I thought simply that Raphael had been careless, and that carelessness, at 14 months in, meant that the affair was no longer being managed. And a thing that is no longer being managed is a thing whose collapse is no longer a question of if, but of when. And I had, sitting in my own kitchen, just been handed the when. The when was Sunday, because Lucia was arriving that afternoon, and Lucia was staying through Sunday dinner, and Sunday dinner was in our house a ritual Lucia herself had installed on her very first visit 9 years ago, and which we had honored with Raphael carving and me serving, every time she had been in town since. Sunday dinner was a thing Lucia loved, and Lucia loved very few things without reservation, and Sunday dinner had become, over the years, the centerpiece of her visits and the ritual around which the weekend was organized. I had, by 6:55 on Saturday morning, decided that Sunday dinner was going to be where I let the earrings do their work. I am going to skip ahead now to the shape of the weekend, because much of what happened between 6:55 on Saturday morning and 4:30 on Sunday afternoon was normal, and the normality of it was a thing I was, at the time, maintaining with the concentration of a woman walking across a glass floor. I do not want to describe every minute of that concentration, because I am trying to tell you a story, not a physical exercise. I will tell you what mattered. What mattered was this. Lucia arrived at 3:40 because her flight was late and because her driver, who was Raphael, had arrived at the airport expecting a 2:15 pickup and had waited. She came through the door in a cream-colored linen travel outfit and a pair of small gold earrings, which she wore every day of her life and which were not the earrings in question, although I registered the fact that Lucia wore gold in a new and specific way as she walked past me into the foyer. She kissed me on both cheeks. She said, "Kara, you look tired." Lucia said this to me every visit. She said, "Kara, you look tired," the way some people say hello. I kissed her back. I took her coat. I led her to the guest room. The guest room was, of course, perfect. I had had 7 hours to make it perfect. The towels were aligned, the water pitcher and the water glass were from the same set. The bed was made in the white-on-white linen that Lucia preferred. The small porcelain dish on the nightstand held the 2 earrings, which I had not moved. Lucia walked into the room. She set her bag down. She looked around. She walked to the nightstand. She saw the earrings in the dish. She picked them up and looked at them. "Oh," she said, "these are pretty." "Yes," I said. "They are." "Are they yours?" I smiled. I had been waiting for this question for 7 hours. "No," I said. "I don't wear gold." Lucia looked at me. Lucia had known for 9 years that I did not wear gold. Lucia had, in the first year of my marriage to her son, given me a pair of small gold earrings as a gift, which I had accepted graciously and had worn exactly once, to a lunch with her, after which I had put them in a drawer in my dresser and never worn them again. Lucia had, I believe, taken personal offense at this, which she had never mentioned. Because Lucia did not mention offenses, Lucia stored them. She was looking at me now with a very specific kind of attention. "Whose are they, Kara?" "I don't know," I said. "I found them under my pillow this morning when I was changing the guest sheets." I want to tell you about the way Lucia's face did not move. Lucia is 74. She grew up in a small town in the north of Italy, in a family whose women, on her mother's side, had been running a textile business for 3 generations. She had come to the United States at 22, married an American man at 23, had been widowed at 51, and had, in the subsequent 20-plus years of her widowhood, become the matriarch of a family that included her only son, Raphael, her daughter, Gianna, 3 grandchildren, 1 daughter-in-law, me, 1 son-in-law, and a large extended network of cousins and in-laws and business partners whom she knew by name and whose birthdays she tracked on a paper calendar she kept in her kitchen. Lucia had a face that had been trained by 74 years of family life to reveal exactly what Lucia wanted it to reveal and nothing else. I had seen that face laugh, and I had seen it cry at her husband's funeral, and I had seen it smile at her grandchildren, and I had seen it go cold at waiters and shopgirls and people who displeased her, but I had never, in 9 years, seen that face show surprise. It did not show surprise now. What it showed, for about 2 full seconds, was calculation. I watched Lucia, in those 2 seconds, move through several possibilities. I watched her consider whether I was telling the truth. I watched her consider whether the earrings belonged to me and I was lying for some purpose she could not yet discern. I watched her consider whether the earrings had been there before, left by a previous guest, and I had not noticed them. I watched her reject each of these. I watched her arrive in the third second, at the only remaining possibility. Kara, she said. She had not moved. She was still holding the earrings in her palm. Come sit down with me a moment. Lucia, you're tired. You just got in. Kara, come sit. I sat down on the edge of the bed. Lucia sat down beside me. She was still holding the earrings. She held them out to me and she said, May I keep these for the evening? I would like to show them to Raphael, if you don't mind. When? Tomorrow. At dinner. I looked at her. She looked at me. Lucia, I said, you don't have to do that. Kara, let an old woman do her job. There is a thing I'm trying to tell you, and I'm going to try to tell it plainly, because I have thought about it many times since, and because I have, in the years since that weekend, heard other women tell versions of the same story, and I have watched them struggle to say it, and I want, in mind, to say it cleanly. My mother-in-law had not liked me for most of my marriage. I had known this. I had felt this. I had accepted this as the cost of marrying her son. She had been polite to me. She had been correct with me. She had, on occasion, been warm with me, usually when the warmth cost her nothing. She had not, in the 9 years she had known me, ever been my ally. She had been, at best, a civilized opponent. We had stood across a table from each other, smiling, for 9 years, and she had counted my failings the way a woman counts rosary beads, silently and with great patience, and I had counted hers. And we had not discussed it, because to discuss it would have been to break the civility on which our coexistence in her son's life depended. And then Lucia picked up 2 gold earrings out of a porcelain dish in my guest room, and she looked at me and she said, let an old woman do her job. And something in the 9-year structure of our relationship shifted. I am not going to romanticize what happened next. Lucia did not take my hand. Lucia did not say anything soft to me. She did not, over the course of that weekend, apologize to me for 9 years of small coldnesses, or tell me she had been wrong about me, or embrace me in any of the gestures of reconciliation that a cheaper story would have included. What she did was set the earrings on her own nightstand, in her own guest room, in the dish I had set them in, and then stand up and smooth her travel skirt and say, I am going to unpack. Please ask Raphael to bring me a glass of water. I will be down in an hour. And she walked to her suitcase, and I stood up, and I left the guest room, and I went downstairs. Raphael was in the kitchen, unloading groceries I had asked him to pick up on the way back from the airport. He looked up at me. She's resting, I said. She wants a glass of water. Got it. How was the drive? Fine. Traffic on the bridge. Okay. He poured a glass from the pitcher in the refrigerator. He added a slice of lemon, because Lucia liked lemon, and he knew this because he was her son. He went upstairs with the water glass. I stood at the kitchen island and I watched him go, and I thought, you have about 25 hours. Saturday passed normally. Saturday evening, we had dinner out at a restaurant Lucia liked. She was charming, as she always was in restaurants. She ordered the same thing she always ordered, which was the veal, and she drank a glass and a half of red wine and no more. And she told a story which I had heard before about a trip she had taken to Puglia with her sister in 1989, and she laughed at Raphael's jokes, and she complimented me on my earrings, which were silver and small, and a pair my grandmother had worn on her wedding day in 1951, and which I had, that evening, put on not for Lucia, but for myself. Raphael was relaxed. He had no idea. He had, apparently, not missed the earrings. He had not gone looking for them. Either he did not know they had fallen out of his pocket, or he knew, but had decided that hunting for them was more incriminating than leaving them wherever they were, or he had not yet looked in his pockets that morning and had not noticed anything was missing. I did not know which. It did not matter. I went to bed Saturday night with my back to him, and I slept, and I woke up on Sunday morning, and I made breakfast. Sunday passed normally. I cooked all afternoon. Lucia sat at the kitchen island and did the crossword and occasionally offered an opinion on my sofrito. Raphael watched the soccer game in the den. The doorbell rang at 3 with the delivery of the bread I had ordered from the bakery Lucia preferred, which was not the closest bakery, but which made the right kind of semolina loaf. Gianna, Raphael's sister, arrived at 4 with her husband Matteo, because Gianna and Matteo came for Sunday dinner when Lucia was in town. Gianna's two teenage children did not come because they were teenagers and had declined. This was fine. This made the table 6, which was the table size Lucia preferred, because Lucia felt that any dinner of more than 6 people was a gathering, not a dinner, and that gatherings required a different kind of hosting that she did not wish to impose on her daughter-in-law. We sat down at 4:30. Raphael carved the roast. I served the plates. Lucia took her first bite. She complimented the meat. She complimented the roasted vegetables. She took a sip of her wine. She put the glass down. And then she said, "Raphael, Caro, I have something to show you." She set down her fork. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. She took out a small square of white linen napkin, which she had, I realized, folded the earrings into the night before. She unfolded it on the tablecloth beside her plate. The 2 earrings sat on the linen in the dining room light. Raphael looked at them. His face did not change at first. It did not change because he did not at first recognize them. They were small, and at a distance across the table, they were just 2 small gold objects on a napkin. He looked at them with the polite curiosity of a man whose mother has, perhaps, brought him a present. "What are those?" he said. Lucia picked one up between her thumb and forefinger. "These are earrings, Caro." "Okay." Talia found them under her pillow yesterday morning. I watched his face. I want to tell you, because I think it matters, that Raphael's face in that moment was not the face of my husband. It was the face of a stranger who had, for 14 months, been wearing my husband's clothes and living in my husband's house. The stranger's face went through the specific fast sequence of a man who had just been asked a question he had not been prepared to answer at this table, in front of these people, on this evening, by this particular person who was, of all the people in the world, the one he had been the most prepared, his entire life, to lie to well. His face tried to begin. It tried 3 expressions in about a second and a half. First, a kind of blank "what," which died before it was born. Then a kind of reaching confusion, which was an attempt at the script he had no doubt built for me, which would not work here because it was being deployed against his mother, who was not me. Then, finally, a stilling. A complete stilling. The kind of stilling that happens to a face when the man behind it realizes that there is no script that is going to get him out of the current room. Gianna, across the table, said, "Mama, what?" Lucia did not look at Gianna. Lucia was looking at her son. "Raphael," Lucia said. Her voice was very calm. It was the voice of a woman who had decided the evening's agenda 25 hours earlier and who was now methodically executing it. "These earrings were under Talia's pillow yesterday morning. Talia does not wear gold. I have known Talia for 9 years. Talia does not wear gold. These earrings are in my daughter-in-law's bed and they are not hers. I would like you to explain, please, how they came to be there." Raphael did not speak. "Raphael." He opened his mouth. "I want to tell you what I did at this moment, because I have thought about it a great deal and I think it is the thing I am most grateful for." I did not say a word. I had, at every earlier point in our marriage, in every confrontation, in every argument, in every moment of my husband's visible uncertainty across 9 years, stepped in. I had stepped in to rescue him from his mother's sharpness. I had stepped in to rescue him from his sister's teasing. I had stepped in to rescue him from waiters he was about to be rude to and clients he was about to lose his temper with. I realized only many months later, spent 9 years of my marriage being the one adult in every room who prevented my husband from having to speak without a net. At this dinner, in this room, with these earrings on this napkin, I did not step in. I put my fork down. I folded my hands in my lap. I watched my husband's face across the table, and I let him stand in the middle of the room with nothing between him and his mother for the first time in my entire marriage. "Mama," he said. "Raphael, I don't know where they came from." His mother's face did not move. "You don't know where they came from." "No, I mean, maybe Talia is mistaken. Maybe they were there before." "Were they there before Talia?" "No," I said. "They were not there before." "No, Lucia, they were not." Lucia looked back at her son. "So then, Mama, maybe the cleaner." "The cleaner?" Lucia said. "Sometimes the cleaner, she comes in. Sometimes she might have been wearing earrings and I had a cleaner," Her name was Rosalba. She had worked for us for 6 years. She was 71 and she wore, as long as I had known her, the same pair of small silver crucifix earrings in her ears, which she had told me once had been her grandmother's. Rosalba did not wear gold. Rosalba had not, to my knowledge, ever lost an earring in our house, but if she had, it would not have been a gold drop earring under my pillow, because the earrings Rosalba wore were attached to her ears by a screwback, the old-fashioned way, and because Rosalba did not clean our bed sheets, because Rosalba cleaned the house every Tuesday and the bed sheets were my job, and because, most of all, I had changed the sheets on Thursday afternoon, 3 days after Rosalba's last visit, and the earrings had not been in the bed Thursday afternoon, because I had changed the sheets and I would have noticed. I did not say any of this. I did not need to. Gianna said it for me. Gianna, who was 45 and a family law attorney and the middle child of a difficult family and who had, I suspected, been watching the earrings on the napkin with an attention that was not merely curious, said, "Raphael, don't. Gianna, don't. Don't do this. Don't do this here. Don't do it to Mama. Gianna, I don't." Raphael. There was a silence. Lucia picked up the earrings again. She held them up, one in each hand. "Raphael," she said, "whose are these?" Raphael stared at his plate. Matteo, Gianna's husband, who had, throughout the entire exchange, been looking into his wineglass with the attentiveness of a man reading prophecy, did not move. Lucia waited. She was a woman who could wait. She had, over the course of her widowhood, developed a gift for silence that most of her contemporaries had lost. She sat at the head of the table with the 2 earrings in her 2 hands, and she waited for her son to speak. Raphael did not speak. "Raphael," Lucia said, more softly, "I am your mother. I am going to ask you one more time. Whose earrings are these? Tell me now, or do not speak again at this table tonight." Raphael, finally, said very quietly, "They are Sabine's." Gianna made a small sound, like a breath released. I did not make a sound. Lucia set the earrings back down on the napkin. "Sabine Moreau," she said. "Yes." "The woman from the Zurich project." "Yes." "The project you were working on last year when you came to Milan with me at Easter. That Sabine." "Yes." "She was in Milan with us, Raphael. I met her. At the hotel bar. You introduced her as a colleague." "Yes." "How long?" "Mama?" "How long, Raphael?" 14 months. Lucia closed her eyes. She did not close them dramatically. She closed them the way a person closes their eyes when a clock strikes the hour they had been waiting for and confirms a suspicion they had been, against their own preference, correct about. "I see," she said. "Mama, please, let me explain." "Raphael, I do not want you to explain. I do not, at this moment, want to hear your voice continue to construct explanations of anything. I want you to sit here at my dinner, and I want you to eat the food your wife has prepared, and I want you to not speak for the remainder of this meal. And after the meal, I want you to go to my room, and I want you to have a conversation with me alone. Do you understand?" "Mama?" "Do you understand, Raphael?" "Yes, Mama." "Good." Lucia picked up her fork. She took a bite of her roast. She chewed. She swallowed. "Talia," she said, "this is wonderful. The meat is perfect." "Thank you, Lucia." "Gianna, Matteo, please eat. The food will get cold." Gianna, whose hand was shaking slightly, picked up her fork. Matteo did the same. I picked up my fork. Raphael sat with his hands in his lap and his plate untouched. We ate the rest of the meal in near silence. Lucia made a small comment about a book she had been reading on the plane. Gianna responded politely. Matteo agreed with whatever Gianna said. I ate. Raphael stared at his plate. The earrings sat on the linen napkin at Lucia's elbow for the entire duration of the meal, and no one moved them because no one at the table was willing to touch them, and because they were, at that point, a kind of centerpiece, and because Lucia had set them there, and because Lucia had decided they would stay there until she was ready to pick them up again. When we had finished eating, Lucia stood up. "Raphael, come with me. Talia, Cara, thank you for a beautiful dinner. Gianna, help your sister-in-law clean up, please. Matteo, my love, the dessert is in the refrigerator. Would you be so kind?" She picked up the earrings. She folded them back into the napkin. She put the napkin in her cardigan pocket. She walked out of the dining room, and Raphael, after a small hesitation, followed her upstairs. I stood in the kitchen for about 20 minutes with Gianna. Gianna did the dishes without speaking. I cleared the table without speaking. Matteo kindly served the panna cotta, which Lucia had made with me that morning, to himself and to the empty seats, and then, noticing no one was there to eat it, put it back in the refrigerator covered in plastic wrap. He poured us each a small glass of grappa. I had never before in my life had grappa on an empty stomach at 7 in the evening, but I drank it because Matteo is a kind man and because it was what he could offer me. Gianna eventually said, "Talia, I'm so sorry." "Don't." I should have said something. I've had a feeling for months. I didn't want to. Gianna, don't. Okay. It's not your fault. Okay. Your mother, though. Yeah. I didn't know your mother. Gianna looked at me. She wiped her hands on a dish towel. She leaned against the counter. "Talia," she said, "nobody knows my mother. Not really. Not even me. And I've lived with her for 45 years. My mother has one gear and one gear and one gear, and then every so often you see the fourth gear. The fourth gear comes out about once a decade. It came out, that I know of, 3 times in my life before tonight. The fourth gear is the reason my father left her 48 years of his life. And the fourth gear is the reason nobody in my family has ever crossed her twice." Okay. What you just saw was the fourth gear. Okay. I am going to tell you something, Talia. Yes. I have never, in my entire life, seen my mother use the fourth gear in defense of another woman. I have seen her use it against women. I have seen her use it most often against other women. But tonight, at your table, she used it for you. I want you to know that. I want you to know that I know what I just watched. I want you to know that I am going to remember it. And I want you to know that if there is anything you need from me, now or in the next year, or in the rest of your life, you are going to have it. I started to cry then, not a lot, just a quiet leak. Gianna put her arm around me. Matteo, who was the kind of man who understood that the right thing to do when women were crying in a kitchen was to be elsewhere, went into the living room and pretended to find something fascinating on the television. After about 20 minutes, Lucia came downstairs. She came into the kitchen. She looked at me. She looked at Gianna. She said, "Gianna, Caro, take Matteo and go home. I will call you tomorrow." Gianna kissed her mother on the cheek. She kissed me on the cheek. She and Matteo left. I heard their car start in the driveway. I heard it drive away. Lucia stood in my kitchen. She looked older than she had looked an hour ago. She looked 74. She looked, for the first time in the 9 years I had known her, like a woman whose son had disappointed her, and like a woman who was not sure she had done with the raising of him what she had thought she had done. "Talia," she said. "Yes." "I have told Raphael that he is not welcome in this house tonight. I have packed him a small bag. It is in the hall. He is going to a hotel. I have, in fact, booked the hotel myself while I was speaking to him, because he was in no condition to book it, and because I did not wish for him to stay under this roof tonight." "Lucia, you didn't have to." "Kara, I did have to. I am going to do one more thing, and then I am going to go to bed, because I am tired, and because I am an old woman, and because I have had a difficult afternoon. I am going to sit in this kitchen with you, and you are going to tell me what you want. I am not going to tell you what you should want. I am not going to tell you what a good Italian wife does in this situation. I am not going to say anything about marriage or forgiveness or the sanctity of the home. I am going to sit and I am going to listen, and you are going to tell me what you want, and whatever you tell me, I will help you do it." I looked at her. "Lucia," I said, "you understand that you are describing taking my side against your son?" "Yes." "He is your only son?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" Lucia sat down at the kitchen island. She gestured for me to sit down across from her. "Kara," she said, "I want to tell you a thing I have never told you. I want to tell you because I think, tonight, you are entitled to it. I have known, since the first year of your marriage, that my son was not going to be faithful to you. I have known this because I have known my son since he was a boy, And I have known what he is, and I have known that he inherited certain things from his father, and I have known that one of those things was the inability to choose one life at a time. I did not tell you this because a mother does not tell her daughter-in-law such things about her own child in the first year of a marriage. Because a mother hopes she is wrong. Because a mother hopes that marriage will change a son. I was wrong to hope that. I was wrong to be silent. I was wrong also to be cold to you, which I was for many years because I think on some level I blamed you for not being the woman who would change him, which was unfair because no woman was going to change him, which I knew and had always known, and which is a thing I should have been honest about much earlier. I stared at her. Lucia. Kara, let me finish. I have made many mistakes. I have made mistakes about you specifically. I would like tonight to begin to correct them. I would like to do that by not protecting my son from the consequences of his own choices, which is what I have done for him, on and off, for 49 years. I would like to, for one night, stand on the other side of the table. I would like, in whatever small way I can, to help you. I put my hands on the island. Lucia. Yes. I want a divorce. Yes. I have been watching him for 3 months. I have a notebook. I have a log. I know more than I should know. I know he has been with Sabine for 14 months. I think, a great deal about the geometry of their relationship. I have not yet spoken to a lawyer. I was going to speak to one this week. I have a name. A woman named Dinah Okonkwo, who was recommended to me by a friend whom I have not yet called. I was going to call her Monday. I know Dinah. Dinah is excellent. Of course you do. Call her Monday. Before that, do nothing. Sleep, drink water, eat something. You have lost weight, Kara. I have noticed. I have been wanting to say. I am saying now. Okay. One more thing. Yes. I am going to fly home Tuesday as planned. Before I go, we are going to sit down with my son together in this house. You and me, not alone, together. He is going to hear what he needs to hear. He is going to be told what the terms of the next phase of his life are going to be, insofar as I can influence them. I cannot influence the legal portion, which belongs to you and to Dinah. I can influence the family portion. The family portion begins with him being told, by his mother, in front of his wife, that the family is going to expect him to do right by you, and is going to expect it publicly, and that any attempt on his part to conduct this divorce in a manner that damages you financially or socially is going to be met by a response from me that he is not going to enjoy. Do you understand what I am offering? Yes. Good. Lucia. Yes. Thank you. She reached across the island and she took my hand. Talia, she said, I am sorry. It was the only time she ever said it. Once was enough. The rest of the story is shorter than you might think. Raphael slept in the hotel that Lucia had booked for him for 2 nights until Lucia left on Tuesday, at which point he came back to the house to retrieve a larger bag and moved, with his mother's icy blessing, to a rental apartment she had helped him find. I called Dinah on Monday morning. Dinah filed papers within 2 weeks. Raphael, to his enormous credit and to nobody's surprise, did not fight me on anything, because his mother had told him not to, and because Raphael, for all his failings, had been trained from the age of 6 to obey his mother in the final instance. Sabine, whose earrings I had returned to her in a small padded envelope, via a courier, with no note attached, did not marry Raphael, because Sabine was not stupid, and because Sabine, I later learned, from a mutual acquaintance, had already been starting to wonder what she was doing with a married man who could not commit to leaving his wife, and because the entire infrastructure of the affair collapsed once Raphael's mother was on the opposite side of it. Raphael and Sabine were over within a month. I have no opinion about this. I did not need Sabine to be punished. I needed only for her earrings to no longer be under my pillow, and they no longer were. I kept the house. I kept most of what was mine and a portion of what was his. I kept my sister, who, when I finally told her everything, wept at me over the phone for 40 minutes and then flew across the country to stay with me for a weekend and cook me a week's worth of meals I could freeze. I kept, to my great surprise, Lucia. Lucia calls me every Sunday. Not every other Sunday, every Sunday. She calls at 10 in the morning my time, which is evening for her, because she moved back to Milan 18 months ago to be closer to her sister, and she calls from her kitchen there. She asks me how I am. She tells me about her week. She complains, mildly and specifically, about her son, who has been trying in a desultory way to rebuild his life, and who has, Lucia says, still not understood what he did, although he is beginning to, I think, Kara in the last month to glimpse the shape of it. Lucia is 76 now. She has told me twice that she intends to live to 100 because she has things she would like to accomplish and because her mother lived to 97 and her grandmother to 99. And Lucia considers 100 achievable. I believe her. I would not bet against her. Last Christmas, Lucia sent me a small package in the mail. Inside was a pair of silver earrings. They were antique and beautiful and clearly expensive in the quiet way the gold earrings had been expensive, but silver, because Lucia, at 76, after 9 years of watching me not wear her gold earrings, had finally decided to stop trying to make me a gold woman and to meet me where I was. There was a small card inside the package. The card said, in Lucia's handwriting, Kara, for your ears only, con amore, L. I wear them most days. I think about that dinner sometimes, not often, not with any remaining pain, but the way a person thinks about a crossing they have since walked back from. I think about the specific moment when Lucia picked up the napkin and unfolded it on the tablecloth. I think about the small gold objects on the white linen in the light of my dining room chandelier. I think about my husband's face as it tried and failed to find a script for a scene it had not been written for. I think about how little I said in that scene because I had spent 9 years being the one who spoke for my husband, and because at that one dinner I had finally, in the kindest possible way, run out. And I think about the earrings themselves, which I had placed in a porcelain dish in my guest room at 6:40 on a Saturday morning, not yet knowing what I was going to do with them, and which had done, over the course of the following 33 hours, the work I could not have done with 1,000 words. Sometimes a wife does not have to speak. Sometimes a wife only has to set 2 small pieces of evidence in a dish on a nightstand, where a particular woman will find them, and a particular woman will do across a dinner table, in the presence of a particular son, what the wife could not have done alone, because that son had been trained his whole life to hear only his mother. I set the earrings in the dish, Lucia did the rest, and the rest was enough.